sometimes pleasurable. So if we come to the conclusion that what I'm really looking for is happiness in daily living, peace of mind in daily living, and that what disturbs my peace of mind is this uncomfortable set of feelings that arise regularly in life, sometimes they're there constantly, then it's worth having a look at what this suffering is. Because essentially, if things are going to change such that we end up having a satisfactory life, a contented life, it's the end of suffering. So what is suffering? Where does it come from? It turns out that in practical terms, suffering arises in guilt, in the form of guilt, blame and pride, worry and anxiety, expectation and attachment to outcomes. And when we look at these different forms of uncomfortableness, we find they're based on two root beliefs, two core beliefs. One, that I am the doer of everything that happens through me, and as a result of knowing myself as the doer, I see the other as the doer. So basically, guilt, blame and pride grow, flower from the belief I am the doer and the other is the doer. And the other subset of beliefs is that my happiness, my completeness is to be found in outcomes. And with these two deeply ingrained beliefs, which are essentially part of the human being, if they're there, intrinsically part of what we are, with those beliefs in place, then whenever life unfolds as it's always going to unfold, into human relationships, sometimes pleasurable and sometimes painful, then those beliefs are going to be very challenged by the way life unfolds. If the other delivers pain, then the belief that my happiness is to be found in outcomes takes that pain and sees it as an attack on who I am, and then sees the other as the doer. You should have and you could have acted differently. And so, therefore, I hate you. So blame towards the other. Because of what we see the other as having done to attack me. So guilt, blame and pride based on the idea that what happens through me and what happens through the other is my doing and the other's doing. And why is it so important what the other does? Because we have this deeply ingrained belief that says my completeness, my satisfaction, my happiness is dependent on outcomes. When we come to see that our happiness isn't dependent on outcomes, that our happiness is independent of circumstance and how life turns out, then what the other does becomes less relevant, less important. What I do becomes less relevant, less important. It still is registered as pleasure or pain. So what the other does is going to deliver either pleasure or pain to us. That's part of the flow of life. The flow of life is always going to be pleasurable or painful. But if our ingrained belief is no longer that my happiness is dependent on life being pleasure, 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 then the pleasure or pain in the moment isn't received as an attack on who I am. And so the question is, are these beliefs accurate? Are the beliefs that I am the doer and the other is the doer and that my happiness is to be found in outcomes, are they accurate? Because if they are accurate, and they are the basis on which our suffering arises, and that happiness for the human being is the end of suffering, if they're accurate, we might as well hang our shoes up and say, that's it. Happiness is not available in this life. The good news is that those beliefs are actually not accurate, and that happiness for the human being is available in this life. Happiness in the form of continuous unbroken peace of mind. There have been people throughout history telling us from their own experience that this shift from living life where suffering is a major component to living the same life with no suffering is possible. And not only have they been saying, hey, it's possible, they've been talking about it in a lot of detail, delivering teachings that effectively become part of the process of change. So when we look at the human being turns out to be a result of two factors, at least on a biological and psychological level. And the two factors are one's genes and up-to-date conditioning. What genes and up-to-date conditioning refer to is this process that the human being essentially undergoes from the time of conception. Once the human being comes into existence in its most simplistic form, when the egg and the sperm come together, a growth process starts. And so that growing process, on one level, on the hardware level, we can call our genetic structure. We grow according to the genetic structure. But this growth, this genetic growth, is never isolated from what's happening in life. So what is happening in life, in each moment, we can call new conditioning. And the cumulative effect of the new conditioning in each moment we can call our up-to-date conditioning at a particular point in time. So the human being is a result of the genes and up-to-date conditioning that exist at a particular moment. And when we look at it, the human being is effectively a very complex, unique, biological instrument designed by life to be exactly the way we are in this moment. Everyone in each moment is one way. No one is the same as anybody else. So everyone is completely unique, but unique because we have been designed by life to be exactly this way in this moment. It's completely impersonal. No one has ever been in control of how they develop up to a particular point in time. And so what I'm sharing here is not particularly complex concepts. We don't have to become experts at genetic science. We just need to understand that from the time that the egg and the sperm came together, the human instrument started to develop. And whether it developed perfectly or imperfectly, in fact, there's no perfect, but what I mean is if one of the arms didn't grow properly, let's say, it was just a result of the genetics. And the different IQ levels that people have, the different personalities that people have, are a result of the genes and the up-to-date conditioning that life has delivered moment after moment after moment. And so looked at from this perspective, whatever the other person does in each moment is a result of their genes and up-to-date conditioning, their makeup in that moment. They're simply functioning exactly the way they have been designed to function. So the thought that we might have about someone functioning differently stems from a non-recognition of the fact that in a particular moment, given a particular circumstance, a human being is able to function only one way. That one way is the way that they function. And that applies not only for the other, but for ourselves. In a particular circumstance, given the unique makeup of the circumstance, given the unique makeup of the individual, the reaction, the response to the circumstance can only be one way, the way it is. And this is simply not the attitude that we have towards what happens through us, what happens through the other person. The attitude we have is that I am a separate, independent entity in complete control of everything that I think, everything that I feel, everything I say, and everything I do. Completely the opposite of the concept that I've put forward before this. The concept that I described, which is that the human being is one way in each moment and a way that they didn't control, means that our attitude towards what happens through ourself and through the other would be one of accepting it as inevitable. Whereas without a recognition that this is how the human being functions, our attitude towards what happens through us and through the other is of resistance. Attitudinal resistance. Guilt, blame, pride. You should have acted differently. I should have acted differently. So the question is that type of thinking, which at its core, when we feel it, when we recognize it happening, is an uncomfortableness with ourself and the other. So the question we should really ask is it rational? Now, if we come up with it's not rational, doesn't mean it's going to change, at least not straight away. Because our makeup may be such that